Good morning, everybody, and welcome to day 2 of Interchange. My name's Steve Norris, Chairman of Meetings of Minds, who puts these conferences on. And it's a particular pleasure for me because my job, in a very few minutes, is to introduce our first serious kind of guest speaker. Because what we're going to talk about is something that in a conference which is increasingly dominated by really quite sophisticated technology, one of the great elements of any properly integrated transport strategy is active travel. It's actually simply getting people to travel while exercising, making themselves healthier, not putting poison gases into the environment, and so on. My role in this was that in the 1990s, when half of this audience wasn't born, I know that, I appreciate it, time marches on. In the 1990s, we didn't cycle. I remember when the famous John Grimshaw approached me and said, we should do a lot more cycling in this country. I said, yeah, it's a good idea. He said, you know, it's healthy, it's cheap, it's clean, it doesn't take up a lot of road space. What a terrific asset cycling would be. I said, yeah, it's great. So I turned to my private secretary and I said, why don't we do cycling in this country? And he said, well, the thing is, Minister, not many people cycle. Yeah, think about that for a minute, because it was true, but it didn't have to be that way. And over the next few years, I developed what became the country's first national cycling strategy. And we actually got moving in a very, very small way. I think the first grant we got from government was something like £5 million to spend on the whole country. You know, you could tell it wasn't exactly the Treasury's top priority. Nonetheless, we got moving. And what was really, I think, really encouraging for me was that when the government changed in 1997, the Labour government came in, I got a call from the then Transport Minister to say, Steve, come and help us. We love the idea of promoting cycling, but we don't know anybody who can help us do it, so come and help us. So I had a wonderful time as an old Tory minister helping the Labour government to make cycling actually happen. And when you look at the streets of London, I work in central London these days, you know, you see how big a contribution active travel makes to people. And yes, on occasions, you know, they go through red lights, and I'm not going to talk about that because God knows, you know, it's a dangerous enough city to live in before you have to worry about that. The real truth is active travel makes a massive difference. And if you go on the continent of Europe, every country in Europe understands how important active travel is. Well, one of the people who I've long massively admired as one of the ultimate sort of proponents of and promoters of active travel is one of Britain's most successful and best known cyclists. And here he is. I'm going to introduce the man himself, Chris Boardman, CBE. He's the serious man. Cheers.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you. That was quite an intro. The ultimate. I don't think I've ever been called, I have been called the ultimate, but it wasn't a compliment. Right, where to start? Well, I think I want to start by getting you to think not about active travel, but what's the point of active travel. So somewhere in England today, there's going to be a parent stood at the front door this morning. A parent stood at the front door, and their son or daughter is going to ask them, can we scoot to school? And their thought process is going to go a little bit like this. Well, it's pretty nice weather out there, spring's here. It's only about half a mile away. We've got to go down those 2 streets where there's always cars parked on the pavement. I don't want them to scratch the cars. I don't want them to go on the road. And then we've got to get across that 2 junctions, which are pretty hairy when everybody's battering about at rush hour. And so they're going to reach for the keys. Not because that's what they want to do, but because they feel like that's the only sensible choice. So millions of parents across England doing the same thing, going through that same process and coming to the same conclusion. It's a really small thing in that household. But when you scale that up, the impact from that lack of simple choice is absolutely massive. 3 million kids are driven to school every day in England. About half of those journeys, 1.5 million, are travelling less than 2 miles, a distance that's plausibly walked, that is certainly scootable and is easily rideable if the conditions are right. But if you combine all of that, that means 13 billion minutes of everyday physical activity are being lost every single year. Nearly 2 million miles are being unnecessarily driven every school morning, right at the worst possible time, and in places where the school run absolutely dominates the morning peak. So if that parent felt able to say, yes, we could scoot to school, a change of that scale could cut peak hour delays by 20%, which in turn would be worth around 2.5 billion a year to England's economy. All that upside is possible simply from making walking, wheeling, scooting, cycling to school a viable and attractive choice. But right now, walking or riding isn't a viable everyday option for millions of people. And worse than that, what's absolutely heartbreaking is many of the kids don't even ask the question, because it's a choice, a freedom, if you like, that they don't even know that they've lost. And that's what that everyday moment represents. Transport isn't roads, railways and cycle lanes. It's freedom. It's freedom to get to work affordably, freedom for someone who's older to stay living in their community, in their home for longer, and of course the independence, the freedom of children to travel safely, and the freedom of parents to actually feel able to let them. And the ripples from that lost choice are quietly eroding our future. The UK has now got one of the highest obesity rates in Western Europe. A third of children are now obese by the time they leave primary school. We're around 20% less active now than we were in the 60s, and that's set to rise to 35% in the next 4 years. So physical inactivity, it now contributes to 1 in 6 deaths in this country. That's more than smoking. And it hasn't happened by accident. We actually designed it this way. We created out-of-town retail parks that you can only realistically get to in your car. We built housing estates with no thought for walking or cycling. We widened roads and we narrowed pavements, and we used them for overflow parking for our private property. We made driving, even for really short trips, our default. And ironically, all of it to make places less attractive to live and to work and to shop. So that's the doom bit done. Now to the part that gives me confidence, that gives me hope, and is the reason that I'm standing here, still doing this job. The demand for something better is there, and it's always been there. Surveys are consistently showing us that 2 in 3 people support reallocating space for walking and cycling. 77% want to see traffic levels in our towns and cities reduced. In fact, we've all experienced it at scale, a national scale, in the not distant past. As terrible as the pandemic was, it essentially forced a global consultation on how we use our roads. We turned off the world's traffic and had a planet-wide pilot, if you like, on how we use our streets. And for many reasons, bored kids, I need some headspace, key workers being told not to use public transport, a plethora of different reasons. With quieter roads, people felt able to cycle. Levels rose by 46% and walking increased by 1/3, which showed with the right environment, we chose to change, to move more under our own steam, and huge numbers did, and they liked it. Shifting just a fraction of our daily trips to 2/3 of which I think I always point out are less than 5 miles could save the average household approximately £350 a year, at least £350 a year, and scaled up, it can change a nation. But it can't happen until people feel safe. Now, I know some of you are probably thinking, we're not Holland. It's normally something that resonates or bounces around in people's minds. Well, we've got examples in this country right now where people, including children, are walking and riding in larger numbers than Holland or Denmark. One of my favourites is Kesgrave High School, just outside Ipswich, where 63% of kids ride to school every day. 1,800 kids. And there's over 86% walk or cycle right now. And they do that because they inherited a 1950s bike lane in the area, and they built the estates around rather than over and added bits to it. And it's not pretty, but it's easy, and it's safe enough for their parents to say, yeah, you can ride to school. And the pandemic showed those changes can happen quickly in other places when the conditions are right. In our capital, a 10-year commitment, political and financial, has led to the cycle network growing from 90 kilometres in 2016 to 400 now. Daily journeys have increased 26% since 2019 to 2023, and they're still going up. Active travel now accounts for an astonishing 85% of peak journeys in the City of London square mile. Here in Manchester, where my journey started, the rollout of the first 117 kilometres of the B network, which started as an active travel network, over the past 5 years, that's led to a 20% increase in walking and a 21% increase in cycling, and it's still rising. That network effect. Cambridge, we don't even talk about that university city, the thing that's quietly just getting on with it. Half of commutes there are routinely walked or cycled, numbers, again, that rival our European colleagues. Not fantasies, everyday, quiet realities in England where the conditions have been created. And that brings me to you, some of the leaders in this room. Devolution is the new game in town. The opportunity to reshape a country from the ground up. With more powers and funding being awarded to England's regions, our mayors and our regional leaders have the ability to implement plans that rebalance movement and reduce over-reliance on private cars. And in many cases, they already are. South Yorkshire's plans aim to enable 33,000 more people to walk every day. That alone will free up 4,500 GP appointments. And it will mean 90,000 fewer cars on the road every day, reducing congestion. And when they agree to work together, local plans become a national strategy by default. Last year, 13 of England's metro mayors, who represent fully a third of the population, over 20 million people, came together and pledged to deliver an active schools network to give millions of kids safe and easy options to walk, cycle or scoot to school. And that collaborative approach showed the power of devolution, how a blueprint can be very quickly created to transform the school run across England that will improve the lives of millions. That pledge wasn't symbolic, it was a statement of intent, and one central government was happy to rally behind. And it's crossed the political divide. 13 metro mayors from all parties. Not many topics can do that at the moment, no mean feat. And Active Travel England, the government body that I helped set up and now oversee, is ready to help them deliver. In 3 years since the agency was established, we've learned an awful lot from places like this, people like the ones in this room. With the help of the regions, we've created a design assurance process that's increased the number of schemes that meet standards, that give that confidence and trust by 500%. We provided bespoke training now for over 10,000 council officers, reviewed more than 3,000 planning applications to ensure that active travel will be a genuine choice for 340,000 new houses. Our Walk to School project, which we launched last year, produced a 37% mode shift in participating communities, with pupils and parents logging more than 9 million new walking journeys. And that in turn has reduced peak time driving by almost 2 million kilometres. Since we were established, there's been 1 million more kids taught to cycle, with over 3 million more people engaged throughout social prescribing, adult cycle training and community project, which is not bad really, not bad for the first 3 years. And it only really worked because we've worked in lockstep with local regions. We're not a grant-giving organisation. We've partnered and enabled those who want to change the status quo. So what do we need to keep the momentum going? Well, there's 5 things. Number 1 is on the list is unequivocally strong, consistent leadership with vision and a roadmap. It's a constant theme in every success story, and many of the people in the room or you'll hear from today are already doing it. Second is consistent funding. Every example I've cited has been enabled by long-term, reliable funding, and that's what makes cycling and walking and wheeling a standard part of the planning discussions, designs, and ultimately a normal part of the landscape. Protected routes and junctions that make up connected networks are what makes people safe and, importantly, feel safe from start to finish. Advisory cycle lanes, white paint on the roads, it doesn't work. In a lot of cases it makes it more dangerous, and it is a waste of public money. Do it properly or don't bother. None of that can happen without local skills to build that stuff, to build what's needed. The capability ratings that we introduce showed that there's a significant disparity between mayoral combined authorities and small local authorities, and we've got to close that gap and invest in that foundation ability. And finally, collaboration between authorities, across government, across agendas. Active travel supports health, economic growth, clean air, safe streets, as Steve said at the start. There are 7 departments at governmental level. There are 7 departments and 12 strategies that cite active travel. It isn't a standalone thing, so it needs to be embedded. I'm sure it's the same at the local level as well. It needs to be embedded as standard into the future. It needs to be a conscious cross-policy choice, ensuring all new homes have those options from the start. So everybody gets what Kesgrave has. If you want to make your lives simpler, back just one thing to tackle all of the big problems, and I'd posit that this is it. You will not get better bang for your buck from anything else, because how we move touches all of us every day. So back to that moment at the start. That shouldn't be the daily trade-off that we have to accept. Parents should not have to choose between their children's independence and their safety. They shouldn't be separate things. Our job is to give families back that choice, so the car keys can stay on the hook, and so children get that freedom back. Thank you. So now we're going to have a little chat. And joining us on stage is somebody who's been with me on that journey nationally and working in Greater Manchester, Isabel Dedring, the Managing Director of Arup. Isabel. Did I get that right?
Only the transport business. But that's about 40% of Arup, so let's just say it's the same thing. Yeah. Great to see you.
And you?
Lots of things to talk about, and maybe we'll have some time to get some questions from the audience as well, if you guys want to think about any questions or comments that you have for what Chris was saying. One of the things, I was struck by something you said, local strategies together, they become national by default because you can kind of stitch together bottom up. You've worked at Manchester, you've worked at the national level. Is that, in your mind, how we're going to get to that consistent approach that you described? I mean, do you think realistically, is this about stitching together activity at that combined authority and local level?
Well, the short answer is yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we look at how the countries work now, a devolution's happening at pace. It is absolutely happening. And so there's masses of choice. But we want to make sure that wherever you are in the country, you get a consistent, trustworthy service if you choose to ride or walk or wheel. And I think only by coming together and agreeing that, the important thing about getting agreement is we actually stopped saying active travel. We stopped talking about cycling and walking, and we spoke to each of the regions last year and said, we want to give kids transport independence and the freedom to stay at after-school clubs. And all of the leaders went, oh yeah, that's really good. And go, what would we need? Well, they've got to be safe. Okay, what would that look like? Would we agree to do that? What is your work now? Where are you working around schools? What would you need in terms of powers and other things from government to get that done? And I shuttled back and forward between Heidi Alexander's office and the local leaders, and they all agreed, we'll commit to do that, and we'll start with 1,000 schools. So it's a genuine footprint. When you go back to Westminster, we go, wow, they want to do this. So our job is to help them and support them. And that is a bottom up. That's a locally designed national plan. And that is the way forward in our current environment, I think. And why I mentioned the 13 MERS, because they represent a third of the country, they set a tone. And then you start to tune into the human instinct of FOMO, which is, why haven't we got that? And that was something we did in Greater Manchester when we put the B Network map online and asked everybody, you can say whatever you want. And the biggest complaint we got when everybody wrote on the map, we've got 4,000 comments and a few hours, where's our bit? And the design went from 1,000 miles to 1,800 miles because that's what people asked for. So bottom up, I think, is the only way to go now.
So how do you, when you look at that, what you described at the end there, the consistent across the country, but where we are now, it's patchy, right? How do you focus your efforts? Where are you thinking over the next year or 2 years? Where is it at the combined authority level? Like, how do you also think about your own role, and how do you then have the biggest impact possible in the role that you're doing?
Well, the combined authorities, they're population centres, so we're looking at volume of people, and our original target was 50% of journeys cycled or walked by 2030. It's 5.5 million more people active. And so you go, well, I've only got this much money. Where's the cat? Where are the people? If I do something there, I get most bang for my buck. And I got asked by the select committee a few years ago, but what about rural areas? And I thought, oh, great, but if we do it this way, it costs 10 billion. If we do it that way, it costs 18. If you want to do the 18, I'm in. But they're the hard choices, and I think we need to get the spotlight on those hard choices and pick the ways we want to go, rather than trying to pretend these decisions don't have to be made. So yes, we started with the big population centres, but we'll go as far as people's ambition is.
How do you see if you walk around, there's a lot of talk in all industries, including in this one, about new technologies, driverless vehicles, trams that are trackless, the list goes on, and often you get a kind of fetishization of the latest technology that's coming, down the track, and everyone, right, okay, that's the hot new thing. One of the challenges for active travel is we've been walking since we existed as a species. We've been cycling for hundreds of years. How do you kind of counter that fetishization of technology? What's the role of active travel within that, keeping it relevant so it's not sort of something of yesteryear? I think sometimes there can be a bit of that subconscious dynamic.
Well,
how do you think about that at ATE?
I think you've got to make it work for you, because people like gadgets, particularly blokes, are very gadgety. And we were just talking about trams earlier, and people love trams and they gravitate to it, and it's, as Steve was saying, it's part of the status of a city when it has this thing. Look, we're a proper city because we've got trams. So people like that, and I think the journey we went on in Greater Manchester was, first of all, your active travel provision is foundational. Then realising that this is how I secure my bus passengers, my clientele, to fund my buses so I can afford to do that properly. And you realise those things are linked, because if the first step out the door is a bit shit, then I'll get in the car. And so that experience from the door to the bus stop or the tram stop or the train station or to the shop. That bit determines what happens next. The key word is easy. So what we can do with technology, and we started before I left the region to work for government, was can we get to a point where we tap on a bike or a scooter or a tram, and that concept is now very much coming to life, but it's all about the customer making it easy for me to join these things together. So the tech can help us make this one holistic offer, and that, I think, is very much what government is looking at now as well, to integrate all these forms of transport. So you mix and match depending on what you're doing in your day, and it just gives you the bit that people are nervous to say out loud, which I think does need saying out loud, and I'm sackable, so I'll say it. It gives you a viable and attractive alternative to driving. So you're not saying, I'm going to stop you doing that, I'm going to give you something that's better. And I think we all know that's what we need.
One of the things I've always been struck about...
I'm giving you really long answers here, sorry, I'll try.
They seem good to me. I'm good with it. We've known each other for quite a long time, and you're always very honest about where we really are at, but you're always positive and very tenacious. So in that kind of positive, forward-looking, but also rooted in the real world, if you look at the next sort of 10 years from now in the UK, do you think, you talked about Holland and, we're not going to be like Holland, or we must be like Holland. What do you think is realistic but ambitious for us as a country in 10 years' time, let's say? Can we get to that vision that you were describing at the end of your talk?
Well, we've got problems, prizes, and pathways. That tends to be how I always look at things. So we know, I've just been banging on for the first few minutes there about the problem. We're really good, and we've been admiring the problem for a long time now. So we get the problem. We've also got a good idea of the prize, and I mentioned that, it's in billions or it's in congestion saved or whatever. So the prize is there. The bit that we've been weak on is pathway. Mm-hmm. People can see that, and you can tell. I mean, we years ago took a transport minister to Copenhagen, and we stood at a traffic light in this bicycle traffic jam, and he said, "Oh, this is awkward, isn't it?" And everybody there was no question, this is better, we would prefer this. But I have no idea how I get from where I am to that. And so I'll go and do other things. And so that breaks it. But you need the three things. The pathway for us, which I think I touched on really, is we need to hope and belief will come from examples. And that's why devolution is so important. That's why this healthy competitive tension between the B network, that's great. And there's another region that goes, I want the same thing. And that's great because you are creating examples that then spread, and that's where you get that. You get a lot of local networks that start to develop, build, serve a local community, and then over a short period of time, suddenly you've got a national network that's been locally designed. So creating examples at such a scale they are ignorable is the step we need next. Brilliant. And I've got hope because I can see it happening outside the door, literally.
Yeah. Any questions or comments from the audience? And if you want to, I don't know if we've got a roving mic. If not, just speak up. And maybe just say where you're from. Yeah. Oh, cheers.
Hi, I'm Nicola Small. I work for Coventry City Council and Transport for West Midlands. I am working on a very light rail project. I'm the programme director, but if I wasn't working on that, my other career would have been in promoting cycling, particularly to women and girls, because I totally agree with what you said in terms of we need strong leadership, vision and funding, but the other barrier to cycling is clothing. And it was interesting that your photo showed boys on bikes and girls on the pavement walking. And I think we need to do more to change that and encourage comfortable clothing at a young age in primary school, because that's where the barrier starts, that you're not going to cycle if you're wearing a skirt, and you won't see me in a skirt and high heels. I will always be wearing comfortable clothing to enable active travel. So I do think there's a lot that needs to be done around that, because women and girls are 50% of the population.
I think you bang on, and the irony here is, for the last 2 years, I've used one picture on a slide that we didn't use today, and it is took by a friend of mine in a place called Arnhem on the outskirts of Amsterdam, and it is a wonderful picture of just two girls riding along in normal clothes, laughing. And we don't know where they're going, but they're clearly relaxed. This is clearly normal, and I've been using it all the time. And I think you're right. We have to stop talking about active travel and talk about the things that people care about. And women and girls' safety is huge in this. People don't realise that riding a bike is quicker. And so on a dark street at night, I actually feel more in control if I'm riding a bike. So yes, you're quite right. But we don't talk about or bring out those benefits where you think, oh yeah, actually I'd be okay getting home from work if I could ride straight in a well-lit place.
Exactly, and that's why I cycle at midnight, because I feel safer. And I've actually surprised people. They're surprised by, I'm a middle-aged woman now, and I still ride my bike. I'll ride it for work, to the station, into town, because I feel safer. I can get away quicker, and I'm definitely safer on two wheels than I am going down an alleyway on foot. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other? Yeah, I've got somebody back there. Chris, can you just say a few words about how you guys think about the different communities within cycling? Because if you think about the kind of initial community that everyone imagines is the, middle-aged man in lycra type of community. How is Active Travel England thinking about, if you think about all the different communities that could cycle, is it trying to get everyone at once, or is it, we're going to move through these communities in terms of trying to get that big scale of take-up?
The environment, to a large extent, I think it dictates who will use it. So, London, it's pretty feral on the roads, and so you've got the brave who go out and do it, and that tends to be, or has tended to be, blokes. But that demographic is changing when it's becoming steadier, safer, there is more space. And I think it's really important that we show people images that they relate to, and not, real stuff. That's why I like the picture from Holland, because it wasn't something we set up to show women riding bike. It was just happening. And it was something where you think, our kids are being denied that, to get people slightly angry that, yeah, I want that back. And I think that emotional connection is more important than the infrastructure, than the tech, than anything else. People have to want the product. And at the moment, we talk about the benefits. I think we did a speech a couple of years ago on all the stats and the data which I rolled out, because it's a very transporty audience. It's essentially the foundations, isn't it? No one buys a house because it's got great foundations. We don't talk about the foundations, but you need them to build something proper. We buy into something because of how it makes us feel, and that's the bit we've been really bad at. And that, I think, is the breakthrough last year when we said, let's start with schools. We want to give kids the freedom to stay at after school clubs and that independence. And everyone went, yeah. And then everybody else gets it by default. So we didn't have to talk about everything, just the bit that connected with people first. I'll just go off on a complete tangent. We had a thought experiment last year, and we looked at Wales, who went, we want to make everybody safer and make streets nicer and give people more street. So we'll have a 20-mile-an-hour zone, which we saw got horrendously weaponized. And we thought, imagine if Wales had started by saying, we're going to lower the car insurance for everybody in the country who's with me, and then said, this is how we're going to do it. Completely changed it just by the framing, and that's the bit we've been poor at.
I think in the industry generally, and specifically in active travel, we've talked about mode shift as doing the right thing. And unfortunately, for a small percentage of the population, doing the right thing is a motivator. But for most people, it's, am I missing out? Am I going to, look better, be better, have better friends, whatever it might be. So I think being more comfortable to tap into some baser human instincts is something that we need to do when we think about this.
Got to speak to the household. And if you can't do that authentically, we shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah.
But the product that we have gives people the things that they care about. So making that connection is our next big thing.
I think you've got the mic, yep.
I'm Dominic Schofield from Senex. I just wanted to ask, you mentioned the challenge of doing this in rural areas and that maybe that's more expensive. We've been thinking about how to connect active travel with the bus network in rural areas, and I think there's some some interesting sort of challenges that are different from urban areas, but maybe that's a way of doing active travel for longer journeys in rural areas without it costing loads, because you don't have to build a full active travel network that connects everywhere up. You're just combining with the bus network. And I wondered if that's something that Active Travel England is looking at?
Yeah, we didn't really talk about the kind of integration with the wider network.
Because my old boss is waiting to get on the stage here, so...
He can wait.
Make him wait.
I mean, he was a few minutes late, so on that basis, I think he can wait.
Oh, I think I mean, that's the point, and that is the B network, that is integrated transport strategy in the round, is make it easy for people to mix and match for what they want for the day, and it's a different mix and match if you're in a rural community, but it's the same thing. Give people options that are easy, and I can integrate them, and I can tap with one card or one app on different things, and that's something that everybody can buy into. I think easy is the key word, isn't it?
Okay, one more question. Andy, you can handle that. Yeah, okay, I've got somebody at the back there. Can I get a mic to about 4 rows back? Yeah, keep your hand up so she can see you. Killer last question. Let's go.
Sure. My name is Raoul van Lennep. I'm from EIT Mobility. So my question is, I'm Dutch of origin, and what we've done in the Netherlands is the health impact. So what we invest in active mobility is rewarded from reduction of people who have heart problems and things like that. So is that an equation you're also looking into in terms of active mobility, in terms of looking at the health impact that this drives for people utilizing bikes, etc.?
I didn't fully understand the question. I can't hear very well from here,
The health
but
impact
I'll
of
answer it anyway.
mobility, yeah.
One of the things I asked the team when we inherited this 50% of journeys cycled or walked target when I took the job at Active Travel England, I went and asked them what that meant, and they went away for 2 days and came back and said, oh, it's 5.5 million more people active. And we went, oh, that's good. What does that mean? And they went, oh, and they disappeared. They came back 2 weeks later and said, it's 4 million fewer sick days. It's 2 to 3 million fewer GP visits. And then suddenly you start to connect and realize how many of your problems that it solved. I mean, this isn't really a transport mission. It is a health mission and local economy mission, and making sure that public transport has a constant supply of customers. It speaks to so many agendas, and sometimes that's the problem. It waters itself down. But health is the main flag that I think we need to get to the top of the hill.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Chris. Very inspiring.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone, for listening.
Thanks.